So we had been reading this letter, this sort of quote pro-reform letter, and he had argued for prayer in German, and he does more than some people just argue halachically, that it's permitted. He does more than that. He really argues with the sense that this is a really good idea from a traditional point of view. He's really arguing in a kind of meta way with vision, which is impressive. And you'll see it especially in this paragraph about getting rid of the silent Amidah, and even maybe about only having shul on Shabbos. It seems like a bad idea to us, but the way that he describes it, you could read him. Obviously the question in our minds is he like a reformer who just wants, who has a certain vision and wants to make that happen? Or, and of course, every Reformation is about solving, problems that there are with the religion. Obviously the Christian one was like that also. That things have, in Judaism, what happens is things go awry, and then you have sort of new movements that are created, and sometimes they are very radical. For instance, I think that both Musar and Chassidut emerged because Jews were lacking a kind of deeper spiritual and emotional sense. Things had become all Talmud, and people were not very learned. And Chassidut was a radical movement. We don't see it as a radical movement because it's become accepted, but you have to remember that they were excommunicated by the Vilna Gaon, the early Hasidim, because they were seen as dangerous, as other, as a change. So obviously all religious change is about tikkun. It's not that people have in mind that they want to, destroy Judaism, that's, I think sometimes in the Orthodox mind, we imagine that reform, conservative, whoever it is, are out to basically, destroy Judaism because they're lazy, or because they want to be able to fulfill their desires. It's of course not what it is. These things are always noble. And you don't know, how things are going to turn out in the end. Who could have predicted that Chassidut would have become so mainstream or so much a legitimate part of Orthodox life? I don't think you could have said that in the 1700s when they were excommunicated. Musar. You have rabbis in the 19th century who are yelling about Musar, that it's a terrible thing. It's taking away from Talmud study. But I think it's now we realize the need, the value. So it's an interesting question. What happened with the reform? Because when you read somebody like this, who's very early, who comes with a very traditional background, and assuming that he's being truthful about what he's writing, and I think he is, he's out to make tikkunim. He's out to fix things that he feels are, from a very traditional Torah point of view, awry. What do we learn from that? Where do we make changes? We don't make changes. It's not that Judaism never makes changes. It does. Clearly, we've had tremendous changes, but things can go awry also. So he says, we know that there's a verse that says, "A time to do for God, we have forsaken the Torah." Now, the pshat of that is that it's a time to do for God and stand up because the Torah has been forsaken. But the rabbis in the Talmud use this verse at times for saying that you can violate the Torah to save Judaism. A time to do for God, we therefore have to forsake the Torah in order to do for God. There's certain examples of that in the Talmud. My time I fear Torah. Why have they forsaken the Torah? Because it's a time to do for God. What can we say about it? There are people who have great stature. They know the Torah. All of them, but what happens? They come to shul, and they're just, they're talking during davening. And they're sometimes talking things that are sinful. He quotes an earlier book that had been very critical of people talking during davening, and that it kind of erases your davening if you talk during davening. It says, "V'rova am mosifim chetu pesha b'sichas chulin," and most people are being sinful by speaking about weekday things in shul. Im kain tfilasim shava l'rika batal, and makes their prayers nullified. Now we can't change it. We can't. It's so funny, right? 1819. We can't stop people from talking during davening. It's just impossible, right? It's so resonant. Parts merubal omid, because most people, he says, have broken through. Most people are talking. Sometimes I'll tell you during Musaf and Shabbos, like sometimes there's like this din that emerges, because everybody's having their little conversation that they think is fairly quiet. But combined, you have 8 of those going on in shul, and all of a sudden there's like a rumble. And sometimes all you can do is laugh, because if you're gonna yell, so you yell and somebody claps, but it doesn't change anything. The next Shabbos, same thing happens. So 1819, it was the same issue. It has become permitted for them. We understand this. Really, nothing's changed. As Rafuna says, apparently Rav Huna, even the time of the Talmud, said that the children see their parents, that they don't take davening seriously. It's become normalized. So why is that? So he's saying maybe it's because they already feel like they fulfilled their obligation. They know how to daven. They've davened the silent Amidah. So now's the repetition of the Amidah. They don't think it's important. They don't need it to daven. Have a chachamim be'einayim. They think they're wise in their own eyes. This really has not changed. Omen b'kiyam anachnu. They say we know how to daven. Let's say we don't need the shliach tzibor. We don't need the shliach tzibor to pray for us. So they talk during the repetition of Amidah. And we can't rebuke them. So this thinks would be a good solution. He says this enlightenment solution of getting rid of the silent Amidah is coming at exactly the right time, because we have a real problem, he says, with talking during davening. And the Ramah says that if it's a time, the Ramah does say, the Ramah is one of the parts of the Shulchan Aruch, the Ashkenazic custom of the Shulchan Aruch, he says that you can make a Heicha Kedusha, that if you don't have enough time, the Chazan could do the public Amidah with the people praying along with him in a loud voice. If you'll say that, how can you change the halacha? You can only do it if you're greater. Rambam, look at what the Rambam says. Gazru b'dam mushpashtu b'chol Yisrael ba'amar adaber ken shanim rabbos achas man amad bezin acher roshein ota gzera pashtu b'chol Yisrael yesh lo shesvatos. He says if something has not become spread out among the whole Jewish people, then you can change it even if you are not as great as the previous Beit Din who made that decree. So he says you can actually see that not in every part of the Jewish people did they do the silent Amidah. Apparently there was this kehila called Argunya, Aragon. I don't know. There's apparently some place where they weren't doing it. It sounds like, and the rabbis were upset about that. I tried to find where this was and I couldn't find it. I'm besugid to read Nasir the Shari Mashicha Yerushanan Kedarei. So it's trying to argue that you can change a decree or a custom if at least some people are not doing it. And he's trying to argue that there are some places apparently where they didn't do silent Amidah, they only did public Amidah. Maybe this goes back to a time when people didn't know how to pray. בכוונה מיוחדת שמילת אין מורה, שלילה בלתי מוגבלת. Let's see. Okay. Mashmas Palam Mishanim Havar. So that's what he argues. He argues that, right? So it's interesting. If you think about it, what's he arguing? He's arguing that people are not taking davening seriously enough, and that abolishing silent Amidah is going to solve that problem. Now, I don't know if that's true, if it will practically solve that problem, if you only have the repetition of that, but maybe it will, right? Because people are going to need the Chazin's Amidah to fulfill their obligation. But it's interesting. I mean, I think when you step back and you say to yourself, what's his perspective? It seems, at least in black and white, that his perspective is a positive tikkun, that he's trying to fix something. And I think also what he's saying is not just, people are talking during davening, let's try this to solve it. I think he's saying much bigger than that. I think you have to also link this to what he said before about the way that the Beit Knesset appears to the non-Jew, which is that they would walk in and think, well, it's like a marketplace. Everybody's doing their own thing. It's a balagan. So I think this is the same idea, right? People talking during davening. Now, there's a way, in a certain way, he is addressing where is the mora, where's the fear, where's the awe that we should have during davening, right? I mean, and this is one thing I have to say that Reform has retained, right? A Reform Jew comes into an Orthodox synagogue and they're shocked because no one would ever talk during a Reform service. It's extremely formal. It's much shorter. It doesn't happen as often. There's music, there's formality, there's structure. It's just so different, So of course we understand that there's, that Orthodox people are really davening on their own. They know how to daven. They daven every day. It's a personal thing between them and God. In a certain way, maybe that's better. On the other hand, we have lost as Orthodox Jews, and he's sensing this in the 1819. We've lost a certain part of what davening is supposed to be like, especially in a synagogue. There's supposed to be mora mikdash. There's supposed to be fear of the space itself. Maybe there's supposed to be formality. Maybe we would be better off. And this is exactly what he's saying, and I think it's a question for us too. Maybe we would be better off if we took a page out of the Reform playbook, and we had a chazan. Now maybe this is what conservatives tried to do and it didn't work. I don't know. We had a real chazan, and we had we got rid of the silent amidah. We made davening shorter, and we had a sense of awe and formality, and people aren't allowed to talk, and people aren't allowed to daven on their own at their own pace. I don't know. Is that better or worse? But he's saying, we need to make this tikkun. It's really not so different. It's really, we now see Orthodox, the culture of Orthodox, and we see it as a positive thing that everybody's, in their own place and they're davening. But like when people convert and come to shul, they don't get it. They can't figure out what's happening. Why is this person in a different place, and why are people coming late? And so it's not crazy what he's saying. And is he coming from an honest place? I have no reason to assume he's not. Then he talks about changing from Ashkenazi to Sephardi mivta, Sfardit, which doesn't seem like that big a deal to us. And he didn't spend a lot of effort on that. He just quotes some people that he thinks are legitimate that do use Sfardit. And then he talks about, I guess one of the things I want to do in the Hamburg Temple was get rid of the regular notes for the laning. And he sort of argues that we would be better off with a different, that we could stick to the grammar of the Hebrew sentences better. I'm not sure what he's aiming for, because obviously we don't have any audio here. I'm guessing that it would sound more like something in a church, and less sing-songy like we do. So he kind of argues for that. And then it's interesting, one of the other criticisms of the Hamburg Temple is that they're only open in Shabbos and Yontif. And he actually tries to argue for that. And he says the Haredim says the Haredim, are open every day. He says this Hamburg temple wants to be closed every day except for Shabbos and Yom Tif. So people are saying that's not good because we know that the Gemara says that person, God sort of pops into shul, and if there aren't 10 people davening there, that's God sees that in a very negative light. And then he says, think about the other side of it. He says, think about the dignity of the synagogue and the awe that we need in a synagogue. And if you're coming every day, you feel very at home. And the rabbis said already in the Talmud that you shouldn't go into the Beit HaMikdash every day whenever you want. And we see in our time, we see that because people are so used to going to shul, they don't see it as a very big deal. They don't see it as how awesome is this place. And so where is the fear, he said, where's the awe of the synagogue? And he says, do you really need a minyan every day? You could pray on your own. Maybe what we should do is people should pray in their houses and they'll have more fear of heaven when they come to shul on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. And he says that's their argument. Then he gives a little bit what the counter argument is, and then where he ends up on this question is a little bit hard to figure out. But we'll take a look a little bit at that next time. And that's the end of his letter. It ends like right over here. And then you can see Aaron Horner, the Oberrabbiner. And then we'll look at the Chassam Sofer's criticism of him. And that actually he gives into that. But then in a later place, a year later, seems to recant his recant. So, and I think we can sort of ask ourselves the question of who is he? Is he a reformer? Is he not? What does it even mean in that time? Obviously there are many shades of things. It's hard to figure out exactly. His intent seems to be a positive one, even though it means making change, blatant change, from the top down here, or just, sudden change, which obviously is a very dangerous thing. Since I think Judaism tends to change in very sort of organic ways. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll hopefully we should be learning tomorrow morning. I have to see, my wife's having an operation today, so assuming she doesn't need me in the morning, we'll learn. As I think we're on. If not, I'll send an email.
Yeah,
Yeah, her ankle. Okay, have a good day, everybody.
thank you.
Thank you.